The landscape of modern warfare is shifting before our eyes, and what we're witnessing in Iran represents a masterclass in military strategy and resource allocation. The initial phase of this conflict was surgical precision. Stealth bombers and fifth-generation fighter jets systematically dismantled Iran's air defense infrastructure with devastating efficiency. But now we've entered a completely different chapter, one defined by overwhelming force and sustained bombardment. The arrival of the B-52 Stratofortress signals a fundamental transition in how America intends to prosecute this campaign, and understanding why reveals something crucial about long-term military planning. Let me walk you through what happened in those first critical hours. The U.S. and Israel unleashed approximately strikes against Iranian targets within the first 24 hours alone. But here's what made this different from typical bombing campaigns. It was preceded by sophisticated cyber operations. American forces jammed and spoofed Iran's radar networks, disrupting communications before a single bomb fell. Once that electronic fog descended, the surgical strikes began in earnest. Air defenses crumbled. Naval and aerial assets were destroyed. Command structures were targeted. And yes, decapitation strikes were carried out against Iran's senior leadership. This wasn't indiscriminate bombing. This was a carefully orchestrated dismantling of Iran's defensive capabilities, designed to create conditions for what would come next. That next phase arrived with the B-52s. Now, the B-52 Stratofortress is a fascinating aircraft for this moment. It's 74 years old, hardly cutting edge by modern standards. Unlike the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber that conducted those initial surgical strikes, the B-52 can't sneak past enemy radar. It doesn't have the sophisticated stealth coatings or the advanced avionics that make the B-2 nearly invisible to air defense systems. But here's what makes the B-52 perfect for this phase of the campaign. It can carry an absolutely staggering payload. We're talking about pounds of ordnance capacity, which translates to roughly 70 JDAMs, Joint Direct Attack Munitions, depending on the variant being used. Those JDAMs come in three flavors: 500-pound, pound, and pound variants. The B-52s operating over Iran are likely carrying the pound versions, which provides an optimal balance between destructive capability and operational flexibility. But there's another layer to this tactical approach. The B-52s aren't necessarily flying directly over Iranian targets. Instead, they're equipped with JASM's Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles. These subsonic cruise missiles can travel between 230 and 575 miles, depending on the variant, allowing the B-52s to launch their weapons from a safe distance, well outside the range of whatever air defense systems Iran has managed to keep operational. This matters enormously because Iran's air defenses, while severely degraded, haven't been completely eliminated. There are still isolated surface-to-air missile systems scattered throughout the country that could theoretically engage a non-stealthy aircraft. The standoff missile approach mitigates that risk while still delivering devastating firepower. And the numbers tell the story. After that initial 24-hour barrage of strikes, the U.S. and Israel doubled down. The first 72 hours of this conflict saw targets destroyed inside Iran. The B-52s have played a significant role in that escalation, operating with near impunity over Iranian airspace. But what exactly are these bombers targeting? That's where the strategic picture becomes even clearer. The primary focus of the B-52 campaign has been Iran's command and control nodes, minus the C2 infrastructure that coordinates Iran's military response. These aren't glamorous targets like air bases or weapons depots. They're the nervous system of Iran's military apparatus. When you destroy a command node, you isolate launcher systems. You disrupt the coordination that allows Iran to mount any coherent defense. And here's the brutal mathematics of it. Iran's air defense systems have incredibly slow reload times. Their production facilities have been hit, but their rebuild times are essentially non-existent, meaning once those launchers are isolated and their ammunition is expended, Iran can't quickly reconstitute its air defense network. The impact on Iran's offensive capabilities has been even more dramatic. Iran's primary strategic weapon in this conflict is its ballistic missile arsenal. Intelligence estimates suggest Iran possesses somewhere between and ballistic missiles. That's a formidable stockpile. But by targeting the command and control infrastructure that coordinates missile launches, combined with strikes on the launch sites themselves, America has effectively crippled Iran's ability to project power through its most potent weapon. The numbers are staggering. By March 4th, just days into the conflict, Iran's ballistic missile launches had decreased by 86% compared to the first day of fighting. Within a single 24-hour period, there was an additional 23% decrease. Iran's one-way attack drones saw a 73% reduction in operational capability. What we're witnessing is the systematic dismantling of Iran's entire offensive strategy. Now, you might wonder why the U.S. would transition from the B-2 to the B-52 at this particular moment. The answer reveals something fundamental about how modern military campaigns are actually conducted. President Trump indicated that this conflict could stretch on for 4 to 5 weeks, potentially longer. That's a sustained campaign, not a brief punitive strike, and sustained campaigns require sustained funding. Here's where the economics become crucial. The B-2 Spirit costs roughly $2 billion per aircraft. A single loss would represent an enormous financial blow. The B, by contrast, costs around $640 million per unit in current dollars, even after extensive modernization programs. But the real difference emerges in operational costs. Flying a B-2 costs approximately $1 per flight hour. Those initial B-2 missions over Iran lasted more than 30 hours each. That's over $6 million in flight costs per sortie. The B, meanwhile, costs roughly $1 per flight hour, minus less than half the B-2's operational expense. When you're planning a multi-week campaign with hundreds of potential sorties, that difference becomes transformative. The U.S. gets to continue delivering enormous volumes of precision-guided firepower while significantly reducing the financial burden on the defense budget. It's a brilliant calculation. Maintain overwhelming force while managing costs for a protracted engagement. But there's another dimension to this strategy that speaks to American confidence and long-term planning. The fact that the U.S. is now flying non-stealthy bombers over Iran with near impunity demonstrates that America has achieved air superiority. That's different from air supremacy, which would mean 100% confidence of unopposed operations. But it's close enough. It signals that Trump isn't exaggerating when he discusses the potential duration of this campaign. The U.S. military has the capability and the resources to sustain this level of operations for weeks, possibly months. Let's examine why Iran's air defenses have proven so vulnerable. Iran's integrated air defense system was never as advanced as Western systems to begin with. The country relies heavily on Chinese and Russian equipment, surface-to-air missiles and radar systems that have now been decimated. But there's a deeper problem. Much of Iran's air defense network consists of reverse-engineered copies of Russian S-300 and Chinese HQ-7 systems. Iran created its own versions through reverse engineering, but without any meaningful innovation or improvement. This means Iran's systems carry all the original vulnerabilities of the platforms they're based on. Israeli weapons like the Icebreaker missile are specifically designed to exploit the electronic warfare weaknesses inherent in S-300 radar systems. Iran never addressed these vulnerabilities in its copies, and now it's paying the price. In response, Iran has attempted to shift air defenses from the eastern part of the country to the west, anticipating continued American attacks, but that's not a strategic victory. It's a desperate reallocation that leaves Iran's eastern territory exposed. The B-52s can simply launch their standoff missiles from the undefended side of the country. Tehran and Isfahan may have slightly better protection than they did after the initial strikes, but it's insufficient to meaningfully impede American and Israeli operations. Iran's best hope at this point is getting lucky, with an occasional strike caused by American complacency. That's not an air defense strategy. That's gambling with odds that don't favor survival. What's particularly significant is that the scope of American operations is expanding beyond Iran's borders. On March 4 TH, the U.S. conducted a strike against the Iris Dana in international waters off Sri Lanka's southern coast. That's thousands of miles from the Persian Gulf. It demonstrates that America is targeting Iranian military assets wherever they're located, not just within Iran's territory. This suggests a broader strategic objective than simply degrading Iran's immediate military capabilities. Combined with Trump's stated goal of supporting the Iranian people in toppling the theocracy, it raises questions about what comes next. Chatham House, a respected think tank, has noted that there are currently no signs of effective domestic opposition to Iran's regime or significant defections from the military and political leadership. The Iranian people don't appear to have the confidence or capability to overthrow the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on their own. This creates an interesting strategic puzzle. If the goal truly is regime change, then air power alone, no matter how overwhelming, may be insufficient. That brings us to the possibility of a third phase in this conflict: ground operations. The B-52s and weeks of sustained bombardment may be setting conditions for American forces to enter Iran directly. What we know with certainty is that Iran's regime has been fundamentally shaken. The destruction of command and control infrastructure, the decimation of air defenses, the crippling of ballistic missile capabilities, these represent blows from which Iran may never fully recover. The regime's ability to project power has been catastrophically reduced, and this has implications far beyond Iran itself. Russia has been gambling heavily on strengthening its relationship with Iran as a way to position itself as a global geopolitical player. If the Iranian regime falls or is fundamentally weakened, Putin loses a crucial strategic partner, and his broader ambitions in the Middle East suffer a massive setback. The arrival of the B-52 Stratofortress isn't just about tactical bombing runs. It represents a fundamental shift in how America intends to reshape the regional balance of power, and the implications will reverberate across the global stage for years to come.